The celestial conclave floated in the endless black of space like a metal god. It was the largest station ever built by any species. 12 massive towers rose from its center, each one belonging to one of the high archons who ruled the galaxy. For 10,000 years they had controlled everything, every planet, every trade route, every species that crawled or walked or flew across 4,000 star systems. Today, they gathered in the Chamber of Judgment. The chamber was designed to make visitors feel small. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds actually formed near the top. The 12 thrones sat on platforms that floated above the floor, forcing anyone who entered to look up at their rulers. Holographic images of conquered worlds slowly orbited above the archons' heads. Each image represented a civilization that had bent its knee to the throne. High Archon Thessaly sat on the tallest platform. She was ancient, even by her species' standards. Her skin was pale blue, stretched tight over a skull that was too long for human eyes to find beautiful. She had ruled for 3,000 years, and she had never once felt fear. She did not plan to start today. "The human arrives within the hour," announced Eth, a junior ambassador who stood nervously on the floor below. His 4 arms kept fidgeting with his data tablet. The summons was received and accepted. "One human," laughed Archon from his throne. His body was massive, covered in thick scales that clicked when he moved. "They send one human to answer for their crimes against the throne. Perhaps they are even more stupid than we believed." The other Archons joined in the laughter. It echoed through the vast chamber like thunder. Thessaly did not laugh. She simply watched the holographic display of Earth rotating slowly before her. Such a small world, blue and green and white. It sat at the very edge of the galaxy, far from anything important. Her scouts had discovered it only 40 years ago. At first, the throne had ignored humanity. They were primitive. They had only just discovered how to travel faster than light. They had no fleet, no allies, no significant resources. They were classified as a Class 7 civilization, which meant they were barely considered intelligent enough to be worth conquering. But then humanity had done something unexpected. They had said no. When the throne demanded that Earth surrender itself for mineral extraction, humanity refused. When the throne offered them vassal status, which would have at least let them keep their lives, humanity refused again. They had used polite words and diplomatic language, but the message was clear. No. No species had said no to the galactic throne in over 2,000 years. "This is a waste of time," growled Archon. She was the youngest of the 12, her exoskeleton still bright red instead of the darker shade it would become with age. "We should simply destroy them and be done with it. Our armada is already in position." This was true. 15,000 warships currently floated near Earth's moon, waiting for the order to begin the bombardment. It would take less than 6 hours to turn humanities into ash. "Protocol must be followed," Thessaly said. Her voice was soft, but it silenced the chamber instantly. "We offered them a chance to submit. They requested a meeting instead. We will hear what they have to say, and then we will destroy them." Eth cleared his throat nervously. "High Archon, if I may speak." Thessaly's eyes moved to him slowly. Many ambassadors had died for speaking without permission, but she was in a patient mood today. "Speak." "I have been studying human records," Eth said. "Their history, their biology, their development." He paused, his 4 hands gripping the tablet tightly. "There are anomalies." "Anomalies?" Archon snorted. "They are primitives. What anomalies could possibly matter?" "Their rate of technological advancement is unusual," Eth continued. "Most species take 50,000 years to progress from basic tools to space travel. Humans did it in less than 10,000, and in the 40 years since we discovered them, they have been quiet." "Quiet?" Thessaly raised what might have been an eyebrow. "They have built nothing visible, formed no alliances, made no expansion attempts. They simply watched and studied." Eth swallowed hard. Every species in our records that behaved this way was either preparing to surrender completely or preparing for something else entirely. Silence fell over the chamber. Then Archon laughed again and the tension broke. "You have been reading too many old war stories, little ambassador. The humans are afraid. That is why they are quiet. They know they cannot win, so they hide and hope we will forget about them." The other Archons murmured in agreement. Eth looked like he wanted to say more, but he knew better than to push his luck. He bowed his head and stepped back into the shadows. Thessaly watched him go with mild interest. The young ambassador was nervous, yes, but he was not stupid. His concerns were noted, even if they were almost certainly meaningless. She turned her attention back to the holographic Earth. Such a small world, such a young species. They had accomplished nothing of note in their brief existence. They had no great empire, no ancient technology, no reputation that would make anyone think twice about destroying them. And yet, there was something about the way they had said no, something in the tone of their diplomatic messages, not fear, not desperation, something else that Thessaly could not quite identify. Confidence, perhaps. She dismissed the thought. What did humanity have to be confident about? They were alone. They were facing the greatest military power the galaxy had ever known. This meeting was simply a formality, a chance for the humans to beg for mercy before the end. A soft chime echoed through the chamber. The great doors at the far end of the hall began to open slowly. "The human representative has arrived," announced the chamber's automated system. All 12 Archons straightened on their thrones. Even though they did not fear this visitor, protocol demanded they present a united front. They had crushed 1,000 civilizations from these very seats. They had judged and condemned entire species without mercy. Today would be no different. The doors finished opening, revealing a long corridor that stretched into darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. The Archons waited, their patience beginning to thin. Then footsteps echoed from the corridor, slow, steady, unhurried. A single figure emerged from the darkness. He was human, just one human. He wore a simple gray uniform with no visible weapons. His hair was gray at the temples, and his face carried the lines of someone who had lived through difficult years. He was not tall. He was not physically impressive by any standard the Archons used to measure strength. He walked into the chamber of judgment as if he owned it. Eth felt a chill run down his spine. He did not know why. The human was just one man, one small, fragile, short-lived creature facing the rulers of the galaxy. But something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The human stopped in the center of the chamber, looked up at the 12 thrones floating above him, and smiled. "Good morning," he said. "My name is Commander Elias Vance. I believe you wanted to speak with me." Commander Elias Vance had walked many corridors in his 47 years of life. He had walked through military bases and government buildings. He had walked through hospitals and graveyards. He had walked through the burning ruins of cities and the quiet halls of peace negotiations. But he had never walked a corridor quite like this one. The approach to the Chamber of Judgment was designed to break spirits. The walls showed images of destroyed worlds. The floor was made from the compressed remains of extinct species. Every step was meant to remind visitors that the galactic throne had crushed civilizations far greater than theirs. Vance walked through it all without slowing down. His mind drifted back 40 years, to the day everything changed. He had been 7 years old when humanity discovered faster-than-light travel. He remembered the celebrations, the hope, the dreams of exploring the stars and meeting new friends among the distant worlds. Humanity had looked up at the night sky and seen infinite possibility. Then the galactic throne made contact. The message was simple: submit or die. Those were the only options the throne offered to new species. Most civilizations, upon learning that they faced a 10,000-year-old empire with millions of warships, chose to submit. They became vassals, slaves, resources to be used and discarded. Humanity chose differently. They did not fight. They were not stupid enough to challenge an enemy they could not defeat, but they did not surrender either. They smiled and nodded and asked for time to consider the offer. They sent diplomatic messages full of polite words and empty promises. And while they talked, they prepared. Vance had grown up during what the rest of the galaxy called the Quiet Years, 40 years of silence from Earth, 40 years where humanity built nothing visible, claimed no territory, made no alliances. The galactic throne assumed this meant fear. They assumed humanity was paralyzed by terror, unable to act, hoping to be forgotten. They were wrong. During those 40 years, humanity did something they had always been good at. They studied. They learned. They analyzed every piece of information they could find about the galaxy and its rulers. They read the histories of 10,000 conquered worlds. They identified patterns, weaknesses. The galactic throne had grown lazy over the centuries. They relied on fear and overwhelming numbers. They had not faced a real challenge in over 2,000 years. Their technology was old. Powerful, yes, but old. They had stopped innovating because they saw no need to improve. Why develop new weapons when no one could threaten you? Humanity saw this and smiled. Behind closed doors, in secret facilities hidden deep beneath Earth's surface and scattered across the solar system, humanity built things. Terrible things. Wonderful things. Things the galaxy had abandoned long ago because they were too dangerous. Biological augmentation. The galactic throne had banned genetic enhancement 9,000 years ago. A war had been fought over it. Billions had died. The survivors agreed that some technologies were too dangerous to exist. They destroyed their research and swore never to touch it again. Humanity had no such agreement. They found fragments of the old research in abandoned databases. They studied it, improved it, pushed it further than anyone had ever dared. They created soldiers who were no longer quite human, soldiers whose bones were reinforced with metal alloys, soldiers whose muscles were 3 times denser than normal, soldiers whose reflexes operated faster than any targeting system could track, soldiers whose hearts had been replaced with miniature fusion reactors. Elias Vance was one of these soldiers, the first generation, the prototypes. He had volunteered at age 22, knowing full well that the process might kill him. 60% of volunteers did not survive. But those who survived became something new. Vance felt the power humming through his body as he walked down the corridor. His senses were sharper than any natural human's. He could hear the heartbeats of the guards hidden behind the walls. He could smell the fear chemicals in the air being released by the creatures watching him through hidden cameras. He could feel the electromagnetic fields generated by the station's systems, reading them like words on a page. He was a weapon wrapped in human skin. But he was not here to fight, not yet, hopefully not at all. Humanity had a doctrine that Vance had helped create. It was simple: we do not start wars, we finish them. Earth did not want to conquer the galaxy. They did not want to rule over other species. They simply wanted to be left alone, to live in peace, to explore and grow and make mistakes and learn from them. But if someone threatened that peace, humanity would respond. The corridor ended at a massive door. Ancient symbols were carved into its surface, representing the 12 species that had founded the galactic throne. Behind that door waited the Archons, the rulers of everything, the beings who had decided that Earth would burn. Vance paused for just a moment. He thought about his daughter and his back on Earth. He thought about the parks where children played and the schools where they learned. He thought about the billions of ordinary humans living ordinary lives, unaware that their fate would be decided in the next few hours. They were depending on him, all of them. He took a deep breath, not because he needed to calm his nerves. His augmentations had removed the ability to feel true fear long ago. He breathed because it was a human thing to do, and he wanted to remember what that felt like. Then he stepped forward, and the doors began to open. Inside the chamber, 12 bioscanners hidden in the walls activated automatically. They were designed to analyze any visitor and identify potential threats. In 10,000 years, they had never found anything that worried the Archons. The scanners found something now. Warning signals erupted across every security system in the chamber. Lights flashed. Alarms that had not sounded in centuries began to wail. The scanners could not understand what they were seeing. The visitor appeared human. He had human DNA, human appearance, human mannerisms. But his cellular density was 9 times higher than any known species. His neural activity operated at speeds that should have been impossible. His internal temperature suggested he was running a contained nuclear reaction inside his chest. He was not just a human. He was something else entirely. Eth saw the warnings flash across his tablet and felt his blood turn cold. He looked up at the approaching figure with new eyes. This was what he had feared. This was what the quiet years had been hiding. Humanity had not been cowering in fear. They had been evolving. Vance walked to the center of the chamber and stopped. He looked up at the 12 Archons on their floating thrones. They stared back at him with expressions ranging from confusion to anger. He smiled at them. "Good morning," he said. "My name is Commander Elias Vance. I believe you wanted to speak with me." His voice was calm and polite, but somewhere in its depths, there was something that made even High Archon Thessaly shift uncomfortably on her throne. It was the voice of something that was not afraid. It was the voice of something that had never needed to be. High Archon Thessaly stared down at the human standing in her chamber. He was so small, so ordinary-looking. Gray hair, weathered face, average build. He looked like any other aging member of a short-lived species. But the warnings kept flashing on every screen in the room. "Silence those alarms," she commanded. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. Instantly, the warning sound stopped, but the data on the screens remained, and the other Archons were reading it with growing unease. "What is the meaning of this?" Archon demanded. He leaned forward on his throne, his scales clicking nervously. "What are you?" Vance looked up at him with calm eyes. "I am the representative of Earth. I am here to discuss your demands." "That is not what I asked," pointed at the nearest screen, which showed biological readings that made no sense. "Our scanners say you are not human, or not entirely human. Explain yourself." Vance tilted his head slightly, as if considering how much to reveal. Then he shrugged. It was such a human gesture that it seemed wrong coming from someone whose body was apparently more machine than flesh. "I am what your ancestors feared," he said simply. "I am what they banned 9,000 years ago. I am what you forgot could exist." Silence fell over the chamber. The Archons exchanged glances. Some of them were old enough to remember the stories. The biowars, the terrible soldiers that could not be killed, the decision to destroy all research and never speak of it again. "Impossible," Archon breathed. Her red exoskeleton had gone pale. That technology was destroyed. The knowledge was erased. "From your databases, yes," Vance agreed. "But the galaxy is large. Fragments survived in forgotten corners, and humanity has always been very good at finding things that others have lost." Thessaly's eyes narrowed. She was 3,000 years old. She had ruled through crises that would have broken lesser beings. She was not about to be intimidated by one modified human, no matter how impressive his modifications might be. "You are one creature," she said coldly. "Our armada orbits you as we speak. 15,000 warships. You could not defeat them even if you were 1,000 times stronger than you appear." Vance nodded. "You are correct. I could not defeat your armada." "Then why are you here? to beg for mercy. Thessaly allowed herself a thin smile. You may beg if you wish. It will not change anything, but I will permit it. I am not here to beg. Vance reached into his pocket. Every guard in the chamber tensed. Weapons systems activated, targeting lasers painted red dots across his body. He pulled out a small data chip and held it up. I am here to negotiate. He tossed the chip lightly into the air. It floated upward, caught by the chamber's gravity manipulation systems, and projected a holographic display for all to see. It showed a map of the galaxy. 12 points were highlighted in red, the capital worlds of the 12 archons. During our quiet years, Vance said, we did more than just modify ourselves. We also deployed certain insurance policies. Each of yours is currently within range of hidden weapons platforms. Kill satellites, your people would call them. They have been in position for 15 years. The chamber erupted in chaos. Archons shouted in disbelief. Guards scrambled to verify the claim. Eth frantically worked his tablet, searching for any sign of the weapons the human described. He found them. They were hidden in asteroid fields, disguised as space debris, buried in the surfaces of moons. They had been invisible to all scans because humanity had designed them to be invisible. 15 years they had waited, silent and patient, like spiders in a web. And they were very, very deadly. This is a bluff, Archon snarled, but his voice shook slightly. Test it if you wish, Vance replied. Give the order to attack Earth. See what happens to your worlds in response. Thessaly's hands gripped the arms of her throne. Her mind raced through possibilities. The human could be lying, but the data Eth was displaying suggested otherwise. The weapons were real, and if they were triggered, billions would die. Her own world would burn. What do you want? She asked. Her voice was still cold, but something had changed in it, a crack in the ice. Vance lowered his hand. Our terms are simple. First, your armada will withdraw from our solar system immediately. Second, you will release all species currently held under forced vassalage. Third, the Galactic Throne will sign a new accord recognizing humanity as equals, not subjects. Laughter burst from several thrones. It was nervous laughter, uncertain but laughter nonetheless. Equals? Archon shook her head. You are one species, one small world. We rule 4,000 systems. We will never accept you as equals. Then your worlds will burn. Vance said it without emotion, without threat. He was simply stating a fact. Thessaly raised her hand, silencing the others. She studied the human below her with new eyes. He was not afraid. He was not bluffing. He stood in the heart of the Galactic Throne's power, surrounded by beings who could crush him in an instant, and he spoke of burning worlds as if discussing the weather. This was not a diplomat. This was not a soldier. This was something else entirely. You speak of weapons, she said carefully, but weapons can be destroyed. Our fleets could hunt down your satellites before they fired. Some of them perhaps, Vance admitted, but not all, and not in time. The moment any hostile action is taken against Earth or against me, the order will be given. Your worlds will burn before your ships can return to defend them. You would murder billions. You were planning to murder billions first. Vance's voice hardened for just a moment. Every man, woman, and child on Earth, every human who ever lived or ever would live. You came here to commit genocide against my people. Do not pretend to be horrified by the concept of mass death. You invented it. The words hung in the air like a blade. Eth watched from the shadows, his heart pounding. He had tried to warn them. He had seen the signs, but no one had listened. And now it was too late. Thessaly rose from her throne. It was a gesture she had not made in 500 years. When the High Archon stood, it meant either great honor or great danger. You come into my chamber, she said softly. You threaten my worlds. You demand that we abandon 10,000 years of tradition. You expect us to simply surrender because you have hidden a few weapons in the darkness. She stepped off her platform and floated down toward the floor. The other Archons watched in shock. The High Archon never descended. Never. She landed in front of Vance. She was taller than him by at least 2 feet. Her shadow fell over him like a shroud. "I do not accept your terms," she said, "and I do not believe you will destroy our worlds, because if you do, we will certainly destroy yours in return. Mutual destruction benefits no one." Vance looked up at her. He did not step back. He did not flinch. "You are right," he said. "Mutual destruction benefits no one. That is why I hope you will choose peace, but if you choose war instead—" He paused. "Humanity has already accepted that we might die. We made that choice 40 years ago. The question is whether you have accepted the same." He smiled. "Somehow I do not think you have." Thessaly's face twisted with rage. She had not felt this emotion in centuries. How dare this creature challenge her? How dare this primitive, short-lived, insignificant being speak to her as if they were equals? "Kill him," she commanded. The guards raised their weapons. Vance did not move. A high-pitched frequency filled the chamber. The guards screamed and collapsed, clutching their heads. Their neural implants, the devices that connected them to the throne's command network, overloaded and burned out in an instant. Every single one of them fell to the ground, unconscious or dead. Vance had not moved a finger. He had not drawn a weapon. He had simply broadcast a signal from his own modified nervous system. He looked at Thessaly with something that might have been pity. "You really should not have done that," he said quietly. "I was hoping we could resolve this peacefully." In orbit around Earth's moon, the hidden human fleet activated its weapons and began targeting the throne's armada. The war had begun. Chaos consumed the chamber of judgment. Guards lay unconscious on the floor, their neural implants burned to ash inside their skulls. The Archons scrambled on their floating platforms, shouting orders into communication devices that received no response. Emergency lights flashed red and gold across the massive hall. And in the center of it all, Commander Elias Vance stood perfectly still. High Archon Thessaly stared at the fallen guards. These were elite soldiers, the best the Galactic Throne had to offer. They had been trained since birth to fight and die for their rulers. They had weapons that could vaporize steel. And the human had disabled all of them without lifting a hand. "What did you do?" she whispered. "Your guards use neural implants to communicate and coordinate," Vance explained calmly. "Standard military technology across most of the galaxy. Very efficient, but also very vulnerable to electromagnetic interference if you know the right frequencies." He tapped his temple. "I know the right frequencies." Archon was shouting into his communicator. Armada Command, report. What is your status?" Static answered him. Then slowly a voice crackled through. It was shaking. "Archon, the Armada, we are under attack. Ships are appearing from nowhere. They were hidden in the asteroid field. They were hidden inside the asteroids themselves. We are taking heavy losses. We need—" The transmission cut off. His face went pale beneath his scales. "They hid ships inside asteroids. For how long?" 12 years, Vance said. "Give or take, we had plenty of time to prepare." Eth watched from the shadows, his tablet clutched to his chest. The data streaming across his screen told a terrible story. The Throne's armada near Earth was being systematically destroyed. Human ships emerged from hiding places that should have been impossible. They used weapons that the scanners could not identify. They moved with precision and speed that suggested they had practiced this exact battle thousands of times. Because they had. For 40 years, humanity had run simulations. They had studied every tactic the Throne had ever used. They had identified every weakness, every blind spot, every assumption that the galaxy's rulers had never thought to question. And now they were using all of it. "This cannot be happening," Archon breathed. She was younger than the others, more prone to panic. How could they hide this from us? We have spies everywhere. We monitor everything. You monitor what you expect to find, Vance replied. You look for threats that match your understanding of what threats look like. Giant fleets, massive weapons, open defiance. You never thought to look for a species that would spend 40 years pretending to be weak while building strength in secret. He began to walk forward, slowly. Each step echoed through the silent chamber. You ruled through fear, he continued. You conquered through overwhelming force, and it worked for 10,000 years because no one had ever shown you a different way to fight. Another step. The Archons watched him approach with growing terror. Humanity learned a long time ago that the greatest weapon is not strength, it is patience. We waited, we watched, we let you believe you had already won. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And then we stopped pretending. Thessaly drew herself up to her full height. She was ancient and powerful, and she had broken civilizations with her bare hands in younger days. She would not cower before this creature. Even if you destroy our armada, she said, you cannot defeat the entire throne. We have millions of ships spread across the galaxy. We will raise new fleets. We will hunt you down. We will burn every human colony and every human ship until nothing remains. You could try, Vance agreed. But consider this. While you gathered your fleets and planned your invasion, we were not idle. The kill satellites around you are just the beginning. We have agents on every major station in the galaxy. We have infiltrated your communication networks. We have seeded weapons in places you will never find until they activate. He stopped walking. He was close to Thessaly now, close enough that she could have reached out and touched him. You could fight us, he said quietly. You would probably win eventually, but the cost would be everything. Your worlds, your people, your entire civilization. Is that what you want? Is your pride worth that much? For the first time in 3,000 years, High Archon Thessaly felt something she did not recognize. Doubt. She looked at the other Archons. Some of them were still defiant, was muttering about revenge, was composing herself and trying to look strong. But others, Archon, who had ruled the agricultural worlds for 800 years, was staring at Vance with calculating eyes. Archon Prim, master of the throne's financial systems, was whispering urgently with his advisors. Archon, the youngest of the 12, looked openly frightened. The coalition was cracking. Spoke first. The terms you offered earlier, withdrawal from Earth, release of vassal species, recognition as equals. She paused. If we accept these terms, you will deactivate your weapons. Yes, Vance said. And you will not attempt to conquer our territories. Humanity has no interest in conquest. We simply want to live in peace. Nodded slowly. Then I accept your terms. The chamber erupted again, shouted in outrage. Thessaly spun toward with murder in her eyes, but before she could speak, Archon Prim stood as well. I also accept, he said. My worlds cannot afford a war of extinction, not when peaceful resolution is possible. Then Archon, then 3 others. 8 Archons stood in agreement, 8 out of 12. Thessaly watched her coalition collapse in real time. 10,000 years of unity shattered in moments. The galactic throne had never fractured like this. Never. Traitors, she hissed. Cowards, you would surrender to this primitive species rather than fight. We would live rather than die, replied calmly. That is not cowardice, that is wisdom. Thessaly turned back to Vance. Rage burned in her ancient eyes. You have not won. This is not over. I will never accept these terms. I will gather those loyal to me, and we will. You will run, Vance interrupted. You will flee to some dark corner of the galaxy and plot your revenge. I know, we expected this. He reached into his pocket again. This time, he pulled out a small device with a single button. Before you go, he said, there is something you should see, something the entire galaxy should see. He pressed the button. Across the galaxy, on every screen and every display and every communication device, a broadcast began. It showed footage that humanity had kept hidden for 40 years. Footage of their training facilities, their weapons factories, their fleet construction yards. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the true face of humanity was revealed. Ships that could outrun anything the throne had built. Soldiers who could survive wounds that would kill any other species. Weapons that made the throne's arsenal look like children's toys. And behind it all, the faces of ordinary humans, farmers and teachers and artists and scientists, parents holding children, old couples walking through parks, young people laughing with friends. A species that had prepared for war while living in peace. A civilization that had built the power to destroy the galaxy while hoping they would never have to use it. The broadcast ended with a single message, displayed in every language the galaxy knew. We do not want war, we want to live. We want you to live too. Let us build something better together. Eth felt tears forming in his eyes. He did not know why. Perhaps it was relief. Perhaps it was awe. Perhaps it was shame at how wrong he had been about these humans. They were not primitives. They were not monsters. They were something the galaxy had never seen before. High Archon Thessaly backed away from Vance. Her face was twisted with emotions she could not name, hate and fear and something else, something that might have been respect. "This is not over," she said again, but her voice had lost its certainty. "No," Vance agreed. "It is just beginning, but what comes next is up to you, all of you." He looked at the 8 Archons who had accepted his terms, then at the 4 who had not. "Choose wisely." Thessaly turned and walked toward the chamber's private exit, and one other followed her. They did not look back. The remaining Archons watched them go. Then they turned to Vance, uncertain and afraid, but also something else. "Hopeful." "What happens now?" Archon asked. Vance smiled. For the first time there was warmth in it. "Now we talk, really talk, and we figure out how to make this galaxy work for everyone." 3 months had passed since the day humanity revealed itself to the galaxy. The celestial conclave still floated in the darkness of space, but it looked different now. The 12 towers still rose from its center, but 4 of them stood dark and empty. Their owners had fled into exile, taking their followers and their hatred to the unknown regions beyond the galaxy's edge. The galactic throne, as it had existed for 10,000 years, was gone. In its place, something new was forming. The 8 remaining Archons had signed the Accord of Terra, a document that recognized humanity as equals and freed all species from forced vassalage. It was the most significant political change the galaxy had seen in. And it was only the beginning. Ambassador Eth stood at the window of his new office, watching ships come and go from the station's docking bays. He had been promoted 3 times in 3 months, not because of any great skill on his part, but because so many others had fled with the disgraced Archons. Someone had to fill the empty positions. He did not mind. The work was interesting, and for the first time in his life he felt like he was part of something good. A soft chime announced a visitor. Eth turned to find Commander Elias Vance standing in his doorway. "Ambassador," Vance said with a slight smile, "I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all. Please come in." Eth gestured to a chair. "I was just watching the traffic. There are more ships now than I have ever seen. Species that have not visited the conclave in centuries are returning." Vance sat down. He looked tired, Eth noticed. The human had spent the past 3 months traveling from world to world, speaking with leaders, answering questions, trying to ease fears. It was exhausting work, even for someone with his augmentations. "They are curious," Vance said, "about us, about what happens next. Some are afraid we will simply replace the old throne with a new one." "Will you?" Vance shook his head. "No, humanity has no interest in ruling others. We learned long ago that empires always fall, Always. It does not matter how strong they are or how long they last. Eventually, they collapse under their own weight. Eth considered this. Then what do you want? Power, wealth, revenge for what the throne tried to do to your world? None of those things. Vance leaned back in his chair. We want to live, that is all. We want to explore and learn and grow. We want to make friends and build things and raise our children in peace. The same things every species wants. But you also built weapons that could destroy worlds. You created soldiers like yourself who can disable armies with a thought. That does not seem like the work of a peaceful people. Vance was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. Have you ever heard of a species called the... Eth searched his memory. The name was familiar. A minor civilization. They were conquered by the throne about 200 years ago, I think. Correct, they were peaceful, truly peaceful. They had no weapons at all. They believed that violence was never acceptable for any reason. When the throne came, they did not fight. They could not fight. They simply died. Vance's eyes grew distant. We studied them. We studied every species that the throne ever conquered, and we noticed something. The peaceful ones, the ones who refused to fight, they were always destroyed completely. Not conquered, destroyed. The throne did not keep slaves who might one day rebel. They kept slaves who had proven they would submit. He looked at Eth directly. Humanity could not be like we could not be peaceful in that way, because if we were, we would have died just like they did. So we made a choice. We would build the power to fight, the power to destroy, the power to make even the galactic throne afraid. And then, with that power in our hands, we would choose not to use it. That seems difficult, Eth said slowly, to have such strength and not abuse it. It is, Vance admitted. It requires constant effort, constant vigilance. Every day we have to remind ourselves why we built these weapons, not to conquer, not to dominate, but to protect, to ensure that we would never have to beg for our lives like so many others have. Eth nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand. Humanity was not naive about the nature of power. They simply had a different relationship with it than any species he had ever encountered. There is something I have been meaning to ask, Eth said. When you came to the Chamber of Judgment that day, you were alone, one human against the entire throne. Why? Why not bring an army? Why not make a show of force? Vance smiled. Because we wanted to show that we were not like the throne. They ruled through fear and overwhelming numbers. We wanted to prove that one human, acting with courage and intelligence, could change everything. We wanted to inspire others to believe that they could do the same. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ships. The galaxy is changing, Eth. Species that were slaves are now free. Powers that seemed eternal have fallen. And in the middle of all this chaos, people are wondering what comes next. They are afraid, but they are also hopeful. That hope is more valuable than any weapon we could ever build. Eth joined him at the window. Together, they watched a ship from a species he did not recognize dock at the station. Its passengers emerged slowly, looking around with wide eyes at the conclave that had once been a symbol of their oppression. What will you do now? Eth asked. Now that the immediate crisis has passed. I am going home, Vance said. To Earth. I have not seen in too long. I have a garden that probably needs attention. I have a life that I put on hold for 40 years while we prepared for this moment. He paused. I am also going to have my augmentations removed, temporarily. They require maintenance that can only be done properly on Earth. Eth blinked in surprise. Removed, but without them you would be. Just a man, Vance finished. An old, tired man with gray hair and aching joints. Yes, that is exactly what I would be, and honestly I am looking forward to it. He turned to face Eth fully. The Titan was necessary, the weapon was necessary, but that is not who I am, not really. Underneath all the modifications and the training and the mission, I am just Elias, a father, a grandfather, a person who wants to sit in his garden and drink tea and watch the sun set. Eth felt something shift in his understanding of humanity. He had seen them as frightening beings of incredible power, and they were. But they were also this, people who longed for ordinary lives, people who built terrible weapons so they could live in peace. It was a paradox, but somehow it made perfect sense. "Will you return?" Eth asked, "if there is another crisis?" "If I am needed, yes. Humanity does not abandon its responsibilities." Vance smiled again. "But I hope I am not needed. I hope the galaxy learns to solve its problems without weapons. I hope I grow up in a universe where the word throne means a chair, not a threat." He extended his hand. Eth had learned this human gesture over the past months. He took the hand and shook it. "Thank you," Eth said, "for everything." "Thank yourself. You tried to warn them. You were the only one who saw the truth." Vance squeezed his hand briefly. "The galaxy will need people like you in the days ahead, people who look for truth instead of assumptions, people who ask questions instead of giving orders." He released Eth's hand and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. "There is one more thing you should know. The Archons who fled, Thessaly and her followers, they are out there somewhere planning their return. They will try to rebuild their power. They will try to destroy everything we have accomplished." Eth felt a chill run through him. What will humanity do? Vance's expression grew serious. "We will watch, we will wait, and if they threaten the peace we have built, we will stop them." His eyes hardened for just a moment. "They underestimated us once. They will not make that mistake again, but neither will we underestimate them." Then the hardness faded, and he was just an old man again, a tired father heading home to see his family. "Take care of yourself, Ambassador, and take care of the galaxy while we are not looking." He walked away down the corridor, his footsteps fading into silence. Eth watched him go. Then he turned back to the window and the endless stars beyond. Somewhere out there, Thessaly was plotting her revenge. Somewhere out there, freed species were taking their first steps toward independence. Somewhere out there, the future was being written in ways no one could predict. And on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, an old man would soon sit in his garden, surrounded by his, and tell them stories about the day humanity stood up to the gods and won. The stars had never seemed so bright, or so full of possibility.